Back in the day, they didn't call this Alzheimer's. They joked and they called it old-timers. Because this used to be a disease that people's grandparents got or people's spouses got when they were in their 80s or 90s. But we are no longer talking about very elderly people anymore. This disease now affects people in their 50s and 60s. If 50s and 60s sounds elderly to you, you're probably in your 20s. The older I get, the younger those relative ages sound. So now, why is the incidence of Alzheimer's increasing so much so quickly? Part of it is we have an aging population, right? The baby boomers are now in their 70s, so we have an older population. It's only natural that an illness that preferentially strikes older people is going to increase in incidence. But again, we're not talking about very elderly people anymore. We're talking about younger people. There's a reason that this illness is striking younger and younger, and it's not just to do with age. Another reason this illness is extremely terrifying is because, at least so far, right now, as far as we know, there's nothing we can do about it, right? The standard of care for Alzheimer's is that there is no standard of care. The standard of care for this disease is get your affairs in order, good luck. Brace yourself for your inevitable decline. I don't know if anyone here is a fan of the show Quantum Leap. It was one of my favorite shows. On the last episode of that show, Sam Beckett travels back in time and he talks to Al's wife, the hologram's wife, and he says, I'm going to tell you a story with a happy ending, but instead of once upon a time, we're going to start with the happy ending. So let's start with the happy ending. There is something we can do about Alzheimer's disease. We are not helpless, we are not clueless, we are not powerless. There are a lot of unanswered questions. That doesn't mean we don't know anything. It doesn't mean we are without actionable information right now. Now, for Alzheimer's, for the time being, there are no effective pharmaceutical drugs, right? There are a couple of drugs on the market for this illness. They do nothing. They do little to nothing to delay the progression of the disease, let alone stop it in its tracks and potentially reverse some of the damage that has been done. So there's really nothing to be done. You're told to just brace for your inevitable decline. It doesn't have to be this way. Something that I would like us to keep in mind as we go through is when we talk about type 2 diabetes or obesity or cardiovascular disease, maybe even infertility, hypertension, we take it for granted that diet and lifestyle play a role in these illnesses, if not the primary role. Nobody questions that anymore. We accept that as a fact, that those conditions are driven by diet and lifestyle. And yet, when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, a condition whose growth and incidence has paralleled those of obesity and type 2 diabetes and hypertension, when it comes to Alzheimer's, we throw our hands up, we're just clueless. We have no idea where this is coming from. This couldn't possibly be a diet and lifestyle disease the same way all those other conditions are. Keep that in mind. So let's see what we can do about Alzheimer's. I call Alzheimer's disease a metabolic condition. And what I mean by a metabolic condition is it has to do with energy, with the way the brain produces and uses energy. Now, what happens when you're tired? When you don't have enough energy? You get clumsy, you get klutzy, you make mistakes you don't normally make, right? What do we think happens when the brain gets tired? Your brain can't get tired. Even when you're asleep, when you think you're doing nothing, your brain is very, very active, right? So any interruption in energy supply to the brain is going to be catastrophic. Your brain is an energy hog. Depending on the textbook you cite or the scientific paper you read, your brain uses about 25% of all your body's glucose, and it consumes about 20 to 25% of all your body's oxygen. So a full fifth to a quarter of all the oxygen and glucose in your body is going to make energy to power your brain. So anything that interrupts that supply of fuel is going to have catastrophic consequences.